Check 1 2. Check 1 2. A tale as old as time. The Packers beating up on the Chicago Bears. A tale as old as time, folks, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Stadium Pulse. How is everyone doing? Just a few things going on in the world of college football. We got a couple things. Double checking my P's and Q's. Welcome everyone to the show. My name is Tegan Randolph. If you have never seen this beautiful face with a mustache and a minor league baseball hat, this is a college football show. It's called the Stadium Pulse. Pretty simple. We only talk about college football. Do I have the NFL on a TV screen right now? Yes, I do, but I'm not here to talk about the NFL with you guys. I'm here to talk some ball. Like I said, there's just a couple things going on in the world of college football right now. Just a couple. We have conference championship weekend. We got to talk about all the games that have happened in conference championship weekend, but in 2025, that's not what people want to talk about. They'll talk about the results of it, but the implications, shout out to It's Always Sunny, the implications is what they want to talk about. So to give you a table of contents of what this show will be, if you want to hop around or if you're watching the recap, we're going to be talking about the college football playoff. Of course, we're going to give reactions and takeaways for that. We'll do the Big Ten championship, the SEC championship, and the Big 12 championship. More than likely, we'll talk about the ACC and all that. I really want to digest my thoughts on that because more than likely on Tuesday, I'm going to do a show talking about what I would do with the college football playoff. What would be my take on it, but I really want to flesh that out. May even get some graphics involved there. But before we dive in, quick self-promo. You know I got to do it. There's a big red button on your homepage, or whether it's on your phone, TV, or even computer if you're going old school with YouTube. It just says subscribe. It takes 2 seconds to click it. And you know what it does? It doesn't charge you anything. I'm not asking for your credit card information. If you want to give it to me, you can. But I'm not asking for your social security. I'm asking for you to just click a button. Helps the channel out. We're on the road to 500 subs. It would mean the world if you give it an opportunity. Did the college football... Let's restart that. Pardon me, Chris. Did the college football playoff committee get it right? That is the question that people are asking. Did they do the right thing? I think that they were in a very difficult position. I think everyone understands that their job is to pick the college football playoff at large spots. And in this case, with 2025, they also had to pick what top 5 champions they wanted to put in, although that decision was already made. If Duke was to win the ACC, to which they did, they were not going to make the playoff. They didn't even have their team set up. Manny Diaz gave them the day off, and he was like, yeah, you guys can stay ready, but it's not going to happen. I got 5 takeaways for everyone to talk about, right? Let's talk about the elephant in the room with the college football playoff that everyone's going to want to talk about with Miami and Notre Dame. What the college football playoff committee did was the right thing. They did the right thing for honoring the head-to-head matchup and avoiding setting a precedent that what is played on a football field does not matter, that the eye test reigns supreme, even though if you go on the college football playoff committee's website, that's not a criteria. That's not a real thing that we're talking about. You have to respect the head-to-head at the end of the day. Their execution of it was god-awful. I am of the idea, and I thought about this last night, and I tweeted it out, that the college football playoff committee should not do a weekly ranking and try to explain and justify the top 25 teams. Frankly, I think they're better off just doing one finalized ranking at the end of the year and picking the 12 teams. Because the fact that we had Notre Dame in front of Miami for the entirety of the entire season, and it wasn't like they were a mile gap away from each other, and we waited till the very end to put one in front of the other and then honor head-to-head is stupid. It puts the Fighting Irish in a terrible spot, to which they have reacted and opted out of playing any bowl game. Any invitation you send out to the Fighting Irish, it's going to get returned. It's going to get blocked. You're not getting them to play in a bowl game, which, by the way, side piece, it is the softest thing to decline playing a bowl game as a program, especially the Fighting Irish. Taking your ball and going home is Charmin ultra soft. It's one thing to expect like Jeremiah Love and a lot of the talented players that are going to be playing on Sundays for the NFL draft. Do I love that those guys are opting out of bowl games and bowl games have lost 90% of their meaning? Yeah, I hate it, but I understand why. Millions of dollars are on the line. It is what it is. But organizations to just say, yeah, we're not going to do this because you snubbed us out of the playoff, which frankly, I don't think that they got snubbed. I don't think Notre Dame got snubbed out of a playoff spot. If we were to look at the pool of teams that were eligible to make those at-large spots, Miami had the best justification because they beat you on a football field. That game could have been a year ago, but if it was in the context of the entire season, say for whatever weird reason, a year ago still would be the 2025 season, it's still within the context of that season. You have to honor it. You can't just have your feelings of, oh, well, I feel like Notre Dame is a better team. Guess what? I feel like if they rematched right now, I'm picking the Fighting Irish comfortably. That doesn't matter because a game was played and you have to move forward with that. And the College Football Committee did the right thing, but their execution was god-awful. You just go week after week after week putting one team in front of the other, and then you pull the rug underneath them. That puts, the entire organization of Notre Dame in a terrible spot. The team now gets the rug pulled underneath them. I would understand why they feel bitter. Now, would I accept the excuse of, yeah, we're not going to play in a college football playoff or college football bowl game? No, I'm not accepting that. I even see Kansas State have a players only meeting saying, yeah, we're not going to be in a bowl game. We don't want to play it. What are we doing? That's soft. But to round out the point on this, because I think people in college football overcomplicated this. I really do. I talked about it on my TikTok. I talked about it time and time again. This entire weekend was pretty straightforward. You had the Big Ten championship. That wasn't really going to matter for the seeding at the very top. The SEC, neither of those teams were going to be out of the playoff, regardless of what was going to happen. Georgia was a lock in their end. Alabama, even though people really pushed for Alabama to be out of the playoff because of their performance in Atlanta, they were never going to miss the playoff. You have to understand that. I will spell it out for you in the most simple way possible. You are not going to punish a team for getting a reward. Going to your conference championship should be seen as a reward. It shouldn't be seen as a punishment, because if you ask Alabama and say, hey, listen, you can go play for a first round bye, but you're also risking missing the playoffs entirely. If you were to lose this game, they wouldn't play it, because going into the weekend, they were in the playoff. And if they had played the game and lost and then they're out, there's no point in playing the game. The risk isn't worth the reward. So when we look at Alabama, they were never going to be out. I'm sorry. If you were to immediately rebuttal with, well, BYU got punished. Can we be honest? Can we be so for real right now? Like, can we be transparent? If you believe that the SEC and the Big 12 champions or the championships are on the same eye level and have the same weight and have the same level of stakes, I mean, truly, you can kick BYU to the curb. And Alabama, if you kick them to the curb, the SEC will burn this entire playoff to the ground. Alabama was the number one seed going into this against Georgia. They were never going to leave. Now, whether or not you believe that's justified, whether or not you believe that is fair, that's up for a conversation. But it was never going to happen. And I don't think it is an egregious decision to put Alabama. You know, frankly, I was surprised that they stayed in the same spot, but where else were they going to go? But I have multiple takeaways from this. It's not just the Notre Dame Miami thing, because that's what everyone is going to talk about. I do think Bama staying there is completely valid. I was a little bit surprised. Frankly, I was a little bit surprised that Ohio State stayed at number 2 or dropped down and flipped with Indiana. And that's mainly for the fact that I felt like with Ohio State, when we did our preview, and we'll talk about it when we break down the Big Ten championship. Yeah, they played Texas, but their schedule comparative to Georgia, who is now also a one-loss team. If we're comparing one-loss teams, Georgia had a much more impressive resume. They beat down on the one team they lost to. And sure, the one loss that Ohio State got was in the bonus round. I understand that. They didn't lose a single regular season game, but they avoided all the good teams. They played one Texas team that was not a playoff team in the first week of the season, got to moonwalk their way to go play Michigan, who was a ranked team. I'll give them credit there, and it was on the road. But their best win was either that Texas win at the beginning of the year or Michigan, whereas Georgia had to play a gauntlet of teams. They as well beat Texas in more impressive fashion. And then their one loss that was at home, I understand it was a regular season spot. They avenged that loss in dominant fashion. Frankly, I believe Georgia should have been the second seed pretty comfortably. I was a little shocked to see that. The biggest winners of this college football playoff, as of right now, before the games have even been played, is Oregon. That 5 seed, you could make an argument, is better than having a bye. I mean, truly, I understand it is a very limited sample size when we're talking about just one example of all the teams that had a first-round bye lost last year. I know a lot of people are going to talk about that. You throw in the context that we are seeding it in a completely different way. Like, we're not having group of 5 teams having a first-round bye like Boise State last year. But there is something to be said about having momentum. And the way that you're going to have a tune-up game against JMU, who you are favored by 21.5 points at home in a night spot, which, why did they get the night game? That's not the point. Oregon now stands at the 5 seed. They get to play JMU at home. Then their next matchup is the weakest of the top 4, which is nothing against Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a dangerous team, and they have a very clear path to making a national championship. But they're also a team that we'll talk about, I don't believe has played a single roster that has been at eye level to their talent roster. And it's very interesting when a team reacts to that. Best example is Ohio State and Indiana. Now, Ohio State has had experience with a talent roster being eye level with the first game of the season, and they didn't dominate Texas at home. We saw the offense struggle a little bit when those talent rosters were at eye level. I'll be very curious if Texas Tech, when they do eventually play Oregon, how are they going to react to that? Sorry, I saw a funny comment. Oregon is in like the most advantageous spot out of everyone. That is the dream spot, is that 5 seed. And they have the clearest path to getting to a semifinal. Like, truly, you could not ask for a better spot if you're Oregon. I would say the biggest losers outside of the teams that missed the college football playoff in these conversations, A&M got put in a really tough spot. That is mainly for the fact that because they lost to Texas, it was the final game of the season. It was the last data point, last thing that the committee saw. They were ranked way below Oregon and Ole Miss. Now, I would make the argument based on the criteria set by the committee, A&M by most metrics should be in front of an Ole Miss, should be in front of an Oregon. But I understand this is a reactionary world. They are going to be dropped because the last time you saw Texas A&M play football, because of the notion of what their schedule is and how they looked against Texas, they're going to drop significantly. But that drop is the difference between going and playing Tulane in a home playoff game. Now Texas A&M is going to be facing off against Miami in a home playoff game, then have to go play Ohio State. Now, by no means am I saying that I would rather play Georgia right now, who's playing some of their best football. But the difference between playing a Tulane talent roster and being favored by multiple touchdowns and now being favored by 4 points against a very talented Miami team is a sky is blue statement. Like, obviously, I would rather be the 6th seed in that spot. I think A&M got put in a really tough position. Now, on the bright side, if they do get past Miami, they will play in the Cotton Bowl in Arlington, Texas. There's going to be a lot of Aggies there. Problem being, Ohio State fans do tend to travel quite well. So I would say out of like the at-large teams, I would say the ones that I think had the toughest draw was Texas A&M. The most favorable one has to be Oregon. I mean, Oregon got the dream spot at that 5 seed. Get a little monster break. Listen, guys, I got a cross-state move coming up. All of this is going to be gone. You're about to have some bear shows. Like, it is going to be some rough-looking shows, but I'm hoping my next setup next weekend is going to be magical. I mean, we have a couple people in the chat right now. By the way, I appreciate every single one of you guys. Check out the page. I'm so excited for this move. You guys can't see it, but everything over here is a goddamn mess. I have boxes stacked to the ceiling at this point. I'm not ready for this move. It's going to be stressful, to say the least. I'm glad we don't have any football games or college football this weekend, or an entire slate, better said. We got one of the best games of all time, but I'm talking about an entire slate. Tegan, shut up. Stop talking about your move. Let's talk about the Big Ten Championship. What I have on this piece of paper, let's restart that. What I have on this piece of paper is a score of the Indiana Hoosiers beating the defending national champions, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Curt Cignetti, take a bow, man. What a remarkable run for Indiana football. What was seen as a Cinderella run, a one-off, one of those years where they caught a break in the scheduling and they caught fire, has turned into a juggernaut of a program, and I don't expect it to stop. Indiana football is not just a team that is going to be here for the moment. They're going to be here for quite a long time. We can officially say Fernando Mendoza is the Heisman. He had the moment. It was the last things we saw. It was the last thing we saw for the entire weekend. It was the last thing the voters saw. Now, personally, if I was picking the Heisman, I'm probably voting for Diego Pavia, but I understand Pavia is not the most liked guy in the world. And I got to call a spade. What Mendoza was able to do in this game, yes, was it 13-10? Was it ugly? Was it a defensive battle? All of the above. But when you needed the guy to make a play, he made it. Beautiful NFL level footballs. I mean, I have Jets fans texting me saying, that's our guy. That's who I want to be leading our franchise. Fernando Mendoza was incredible. 15 of 23, 222 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception does not justify his performance. This is the definition of you do not want to be box score watching when talking about this game for Mendoza. Sure, was it a Heisman level 400 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 0 picks? No, it wasn't that. What it was enough to beat what was seen as a team that was above everyone else, the cream of the crop, a cut from a different cloth in the Ohio State Buckeyes. This was a team coming off of a dominant win in Ann Arbor. People were assuming, when talking about the national championship, you would start the conversation, who do you believe could win the national championship outside of Ohio State? That's how the conversation was going because of how dominant this team was. At every single level, you had an All-American, Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs, many others on the defense, McDonald. Then we go to the offense. You have a young running back in Bo Jackson who's extremely good. You have a Heisman candidate quarterback, the 2 wide receivers. Do I need to keep going? This was a freight train that got stopped by the Cignetti train, or that got halted by Cignetti. I mean, truly incredible work. 1967 was the last conference title by the Indiana Hoosiers. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the 27-yard field goal by Ohio State to tie this game. And if there's one thing I can say to that, what do college kickers do? They effing miss. That is what they do. A 27-yard field goal, which is seen as a gimme in most countries, in most states, is not a gimme in the Big Ten Championship. And I think if you're Ohio State, you take this with a grain of salt. obviously you don't want to lose football games, and it had been a while since you had gotten to Indianapolis. You, of course, want to win the Big Ten championship. I'm not saying you don't, but I think you could also make the fair argument that you still have everything in front of you. And if anything, I said it in my preview and prediction video, you could make a very fair argument Ohio State needed this. They needed to taste their own blood. This roster needed to see what it was like after months on months on months of not having a talent roster to see at eye level. The last time they had faced a team of this caliber was Texas to start out the year. In Indiana, clearly, I don't need to explain to you how Indiana is a better football team than Texas, but I'm talking about the talent rosters. This was the first time that they were at eye level for Ohio State in months. And I think this is the exact thing that they needed to go on a college football playoff run as they await for the result of Texas A&M versus Miami. I will say you can make a fair question about Brian Hartline's play calling. I think that is a fair sentiment to have and question, as you, very much like the Philadelphia Eagles, can have questions about how you have A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Saquon Barkley, and a solid enough quarterback that if, as a play caller, you have all the ingredients of a kitchen and you're still burning the cake, the signs and everything gets pointed at you, you get some blame for that. So I think it's completely fair to question Brian Hartline a little bit. I bet if you're a USF fan, kind of a little worried about that. Don't love that when the guy that you have just hired to be your head football coach just lays a giant egg in the conference championship. Yeah, Sean Ryan, let's talk about that. We're done talking about the Big Ten championship. I talked about it earlier too. The fact that Notre Dame, they don't even deserve to have their name pronounced correctly. Norder, that's what I'm going to call them. It's Charmin Ultrasoft, not playing in a bowl game. Like, it is a trend that I do not want to see in college football. It was one thing to have players opt out. It's another thing to have entire organizations opt out. Let's talk about the SEC championship. Because we can talk about the game. We really can. We can discuss about the nuance of it. I was right on this one. Right on the money. Georgia had been playing better football than Alabama, and their trajectory kept getting higher and higher. And Alabama very clearly was a team that I don't think needed to play in a game like this. You know what they needed? To be on the couch resting up. They had 10 players out for this game, which I don't think really makes a huge difference, but there's a long list of guys that weren't listed on the injury report that are definitely playing banged up. Ty Simpson being one of them. And it's time to have a conversation about Ty Simpson, because I took the time leading up to championship weekend to talk about why Ty Simpson had fallen off the way that it is, and it's accuracy. The dude is just not as accurate as he was early in the year. If you go watch some of the early games from him, we're talking about pinpoint accuracy, a guy that is willing to go over the middle, a quarterback that you could make an argument would be a first-round pick. He's played himself out of the first round. I first initially said he played himself out of a top 15 pick. Now it's out of the first round. He is not a top-end athlete. He's not a Sellers. He's not a guy that can create plays. He can do enough. He's got enough mobility, but he's not someone that you can build the offense or the rushing attack around. And there's no running attack with Alabama. They had -3 yards against Georgia. They were 3 of 14 on third down, which was the complete opposite of what we saw the first go round. Part of the reason why I felt like Georgia was going to win this football game is you're really going to let Kirby Smart play a football team that's going to be one-dimensional, and you're going to give him another opportunity with this staff that is going to get the most juice out of this team. They're going to continue to squeeze until the very last whistle, that you are going to give them another opportunity against a banged-up Alabama team that their trajectory keeps getting lower and lower. It was going to be the most obvious thing of all time that Georgia was going to win this game. The only thing I could hear people the entire week building up to this game was talking about how Alabama, they own Georgia. Is Nick Saban coaching? Did Nick Saban walk out and say, "Give me the headset, Kalen"? A lot of that credit goes to Nick Saban. A lot of that standard goes to Nick Saban. Now, I get DeBoer walked into Athens and beat Alabama or beat Georgia. I get that happened. But at the end of the day, this is Kirby Smart, the best coach in football. He's going to find a way to not have that same level of performance. And it's not sustainable the way that Alabama beat Georgia. That's not something that was their identity as of late. They had been reeling as they had gone further into the season. And what's crazy, and a stat that it blows my mind, is that Georgia had 80 penalty yards versus 5 from Alabama, and this game wasn't close. Ty Simpson was 19 of 39, 212 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. It just never felt like he could get into a rhythm, and never felt like he was really feeling like the Ty Simpson of the first half. It's a tale of two halves with this season. College football is a very long season. That's why I said in the second week of November, we're at the midpoint of the entire college football season based on the calendar. By the midpoint of November, you're at the halfway point of the national championship. There's a lot of football to be played, a lot of time to be played and prepped. And I just really didn't expect Alabama to come up and beat a Georgia team that is so clearly rising up to the moment. And frankly, number 3 on the national championship list. I mean, they're the 3rd seed, so it makes sense. Yeah, I mean, this is impressive. Georgia wins 28-7. There's not a lot of takeaways here, just mainly for the fact that I told y'all this was going to happen. So very impressed with Georgia. They are the best team in the SEC, back-to-back SEC championships. They are the standard of college football. Like above Ohio State, above Indiana, Georgia is the standard. They are what every coaching staff strives to accomplish. They are everyone's poster child. This is what you want to be if you want to have a program. Let's talk about the Big 12 and we'll sign out, folks. Bama should not have been kicked out. I talked about this earlier. Alabama should not have been kicked out. You do not punish a team for making a conference championship. You could do it to BYU. BYU wasn't in the playoff going into this weekend. It was very clearly win and you're in, lose and you're out. Alabama, they were in the playoff going into the weekend. If they win, they were in. If they lose, they were still in. As well, the SEC and the Big 12, there's a distinct difference between those two conferences. It's not just the Power Four, and we're all equal. Clearly, you want to tell me the ACC is equal to the SEC and the Big 10? The ACC isn't even equal to the Big 12 at this point. I'm not listening to any argument saying Alabama should have been kicked out, because any argument is for a team that was sitting on the couch, whereas Alabama was the number 1 seed in the best conference in all of football. And sure, they got smacked. I'm not going to deny that. Sure, they got the worst loss of any college football playoff team. I'll hear you out on that. Like, there's not going to be a worthy justification to put a Notre Dame in, a Texas in, over an Alabama that was playing for a conference championship. Texas Tech wins their first conference championship since the 1954 season. Congratulations to Texas Tech. Proof that you can actually buy an elite team. Shout out to Cody Campbell. And this was the same exact story that we saw with BYU. To be brief, 34-7, BYU. Offensively, their style is just not, it's an oil and water situation. It's not going to mix well for them. They wanted to play exactly what that first drive was for 4 quarters, which was 12 plus plays, 6 plus minutes, methodically working your way down the field through a ton of inside zone screens, read options, getting Bear Bachmeier into the rushing attack. That's all fine and dandy, and it got you a touchdown on the opening drive. Problem being is when you have these prolonged methodical drives, you give David Bailey an opportunity. You get Jacob Rodriguez, who won the Butkus Award. Congratulations, by the way. You give them all these opportunities to make a play. All it takes is one tackle for loss on like a 2nd and 6 to turn it to a 3rd and 11. Done. BYU was conservative in 3rd and longs the entire game, doing halfback draws, but then would drop a random trick play. There was not a lack of effort from BYU in terms of aggression. Execution just didn't work out for them because they were playing one of the best defenses in the entire country. And when you continue to give opportunities, I mean, like we saw, when you had to really drop back into pass-only sets, Bear Bachmeier, 4 turnovers as a collective team. This was the same story that we saw from the first matchup. There was nothing to tell you that there was going to be a different result than what we saw the first time. Nothing had changed between those two teams. You don't have Kirby Smart on the other side of the field that could absolutely change the tone of this team like we saw with Georgia and Alabama. I didn't see a path for BYU to win. unless all of a sudden Texas Tech was to turn over the ball and we saw 4 turnovers from them. Now, the real take and the reason why we're really covering this, what's going to hold Texas Tech back from being a national championship contender is their red zone offense. Because I've talked about it when we were looking at the projection for Oregon. If they were to face Oregon, that's going to be the first time that Texas Tech has faced a roster at eye level in terms of talent level. And that is the last situation you want to be in, where you're allowing an Oregon team to stay within striking distance because you keep getting 3s instead of 6s. Truly, you had 4 of 6 field goals, and Stone Harrington is fantastic. Hell, I put my own hard-earned currency that he would hit 2 field goals. But at the end of the day, if you're Texas Tech, letting Dante Moore, DeCorian Moore, Kenyon Sadiq keep in striking distance, and they could put up points real quick, and they could beat you in a multitude of ways, and their defense is really good as well. That is something of concern, because I think this defense for Texas Tech is national championship level. I don't know if their offense is. And there's so many flaws with every single contender. So by nature, they are a national championship contender, but they would be pretty low on the list on my favorites, because I really do get concerned that they have a very distinct Achilles heel. They can get down the field, but they can't finish the job. And if you leave that ambiguity with an elite talent roster, I think it's your Achilles heel, and I think it will lose them this football game when we get to the college football playoff. But congratulations to them. They win the Big 12. Cody Campbell, you've bought yourself a Big 12 championship. And I'm a big Joey McGuire guy. I mean, you could tell this team loves to be and play football with each other. It is true passion, and it feels like a team you could root for. Frankly, they feel like America's team right now. And it's hard as a Texas native not to root for them. Frankly, Lubbock is a terrible town. There's nothing in Lubbock, Texas to write home about outside of game day for Texas Tech. And I think this is so heartwarming to see them win the Big 12 championship. With that in mind, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. We're at 32 minutes. I got a pack. I got a pack for this move. We'll definitely have our Tuesday, Thursday show. Sunday is not going to happen. I'm going to be on the road. I'm traveling. I'm going across states with way too much stuff. With that in mind, I will say it again, like I said at the beginning, there's a big red button that says subscribe. I'm not asking for your debit or credit information. I'm just asking you to click a button. Gets you more college football content. I appreciate everyone in the comments for tuning in and checking out the page. If you want to see my TikToks and all that, it is on the timer or the ticker down below at Tegan Randolph. Simple sugar. It's not hard to find. But I really do implore you, Kretschmann Media powers all of this. They've done fantastic work with me. And go check out all the channels. If you want to see NFL content in the NBA, wrestling, boxing, they got it. So with that in mind, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys on Tuesday. If we get any crazy breaking news, you may get some like, listen, here's the best thing I can tell you. If you do the subscribe little thing that I'm talking about and you click the bell, we are going to do some surprise shows as we get more news that breaks. I just got to hop on the computer and do a show. That was the same thing with the breaking news with Matt Campbell and Penn State. So I'm just saying, if you want to know when these shows happen live, just click the bell. But with that in mind, like I said, I got to get out of here. I'll see you guys next time. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend. And have a great start to your week.